Now, when I talk about networks, I'm gonna simplify things a lot. And if any of you know anything about networks, and some of you already do, you might find this frustrating. It's the risk we take in an introductory course here, because you guys have all used networks, some of you your entire life, some of you professionally. And networks are a deep subject. This is an introductory course, and so I'm going to treat them superficially. If you know anything about, I don't know, roads, they're everywhere. And we've had them around forever. And if I were teaching you Introduction to Roads, I'd say something like, well, a road is usually flat, and it usually has a top layer and then some sort of foundation. Both of those are false. Most roads are curved so that they drain. Most roads have many layers. There's a lot to building a good road that lasts. In fact, wow, speaking of roads, you know the coolest road on the planet? The coolest road ever? Oh, you might think it's one of those Roman roads that is still here after 3 centuries or whatever. Some of those roads in India that have been here for 5,000 years. But I think the coolest road on the planet is the road between the vehicle assembly building and the liftoff pad that the shuttle used to drive on. You know, the shuttle, they put the shuttle on the tank and they strap those rockets to it and they tilt it up and then they put it on that big crawling track thing.
About 3 miles an hour.
3 miles an hour. That thing was 1,000,000 tons. 1,000,000 tons. It's the heaviest land vehicle on the planet. The road that thing drove on was 60 feet deep. And it has like 12 layers on it. And the coolest thing about that road, because what does a road do? A road handles load. It allows you to distribute load over so that you don't get stuck. That's the whole thing. But the top layer of that road was gravel. It was not, and I actually got to go stand on that road and went down there. I was like, wow, such a space nut as a kid. I was like, oh, this is the road. And the reason they used gravel is so that as it crunched over it, it would distribute the load right. But the kind of gravel they used was from a certain stretch of a certain river in Georgia, I think, somewhere down there. Because it was perfect, the rocks would interact with each other in such a way that they'd give just a little, but they wouldn't squish out too much. Because, you know, if you have just cracked gravel, you know, like broken stone, it doesn't give very much. That's what you put on normal roads. If you have river rock and it's round, it's very hard to walk on. But that road, oh God, that was a cool road. Anyway, networks, he says, getting his shit back together. Networks are a lot like roads. Every one of us uses them. We're all using them now. Your phone's connected to a network all the time. And I'm going to lie to you about what networks are. But we're going to do it in such a way that you'll get the general principles, and then if you go deeper in the networks, you'll be able to say, oh, that was an oversimplification. So, the main thing about networks that we're going to come back to time and time again is that they are packet-switched networks. The kind of networks we're going to deal with are called packet-switched networks. Packet-switched networks. What's a packet? A packet is just a bunch of bytes. It's a bunch of data. The distinguishing features of a packet for our purposes are that every packet has a source address. Every packet has a destination address. Every packet has a payload. Most packets have a whole bunch of other stuff. They have envelopes and they have cyclical redundancy checks and they have all sorts of neat stuff that helps that packet survive its journey. Because a packet leaves a particular device and gets transformed over and over again. It gets read and written and read and written and it gets sent over noisy channels and all sorts of stuff happens to it. Packets get dropped, packets get stolen. And you want to make sure that when it arrives at this destination address that it was substantially the same packet that left. It's like if you were sending a postcard to someone, you wanted to make sure that they knew when they got that postcard that it was from you, and it had not been tampered with along the way. It's pretty hard to do that with a postcard. Pretty hard to do that. So packets have to do that. Everything in most of these packets is wide open. It's just like a postcard. Everybody knows where that packet came from. Everybody knows where it's going to, and everybody can read every byte in the payload. The network is designed to be pretty much open. Why? Because every piece of the network gets packets from every other piece. They're grabbing it and they're looking at it and says, is this mine? No, this isn't mine. And then they send it off again. Packets are constantly being received and then sent again, resent. Everybody's reading these addresses. And a lot of times they're reading the payload too. They're looking at what is this packet? What's it for? Is it carrying video? Is it carrying phone information? What is this thing? What should I do with it? So, in the early days of the network, everybody was innocent and everybody was at an academic institution or in a closed network. They didn't care. All the packets were open and everybody could read everybody's packets. These days, that's a real problem. Nobody wants you to be reading my packets. I don't want anyone reading my packets. So that's why we have various forms of encryption and stuff, so we can obscure what's in this payload so that it's got an envelope. It literally has an envelope. And although you know it's just as easy to steam open envelopes, of course nobody here ever uses snail mail anymore anyway. So
Post office is about to file bankruptcy.
yeah. 50 cents a letter, 50 cents an ounce, and no Saturdays. Yeah. Of course, I don't know the last time I got a real letter, so I'm not going to say goodbye to that thing with any kind of tears. In any case, the bottom thing about networking is that we are sending packets from device to device. Now there's all sorts of layers to networks. There's all sorts of layers. At the bottom layer, these addresses are talking about particular pieces of hardware. They're saying, I'm sending this from this machine. And I intend to send it to this other machine. So at the bottom layer of the network, it's hardware talking to hardware, and it's really primitive. It's really primitive. At higher layers, this address is more, we've got other packets inside here. At higher layers, we're talking about, I'm sending a packet to Google. I want it to come back, and I'm sending it from PCC. So at higher layers, these source addresses and destination addresses are domain names. They're IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses. So when I say packets, there are all sorts of different kinds of packets. When I say addresses, there are all sorts of different kinds of addresses. The fundamental principle is always the same. I'm sending around little packets of information. They always have an address. They always have a from and a to address. They always have a payload. Networking is primarily about this class. Networking is primarily about vocabulary. So let's start talking about particular vocabulary terms that you'll need to know what they mean. And at least enough detail that you can draw a picture of a decent network. One of the things that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to design a network that has certain components in it. Like gateway. You're going to need to know what a gateway is. Gateway. You're going to need to know what a router is. You need to know the difference between a switch and a hub. That kind of stuff. All of this stuff is defined in detail in your materials. It's defined to a level that is useful for this class. If you become a network engineer, if you become a network designer, you'll find out these terms themselves are rich and there's all sorts of detail inside them. But let's start with a piece of hardware. If you have a PC or a phone or whatever, piece of hardware that has a CPU and it has memory and it has a network interface. Used to be card, but now it's controller. It has a NIC. Everything that lives on a network has a NIC. It has a network interface controller. If you have an iPhone, these little iPhones, they have 4 network interface controllers because they talk to 4 different? Let's count them. They have a Ethernet, wireless Ethernet connection. They have a Bluetooth connection. They have a cell phone connection. So they have 3 NICs. I guess they don't have infrared anymore. Some of the earlier Blackberries and stuff also had an infrared network that they can. So for every network, every different type of network that your device wants to talk to, it needs a network interface controller. Every one of these controllers has an address, and it's called a MAC. And I don't remember what that stands for. Does anyone remember what MAC stands for? MAC. It's like, you think I would remember. Nope. Let me do a quick look up on this thing for you. This MAC address is a unique address for that particular NIC. Bing, don't do this to me, dude. I'm a man who needs to know. I recently switched from Google to Bing because I was tired of Google knowing everything. Media access control. Media access control. Media access. So every one of your devices has a MAC address. Let's see if we can quickly show you this in reality. So if you have a PC, you have something called the command line. We've been down here before. And you probably, I hate these machines because every time I do anything to these machines, it forgets me the next day. It's like I never existed. That's all right. So what's the command for me to see the parameters on my interface, my network interface? Anyone here know? You ever been down here before? It is ipconfig. From the depths of time. Internet Protocol configuration. Yeah, but I don't get to see my MAC address here. Oh well. Now, if you get up a layer or two, every device has what's called an IP address. These IP addresses, you can see one here, these are handed out via somebody else on the network. And they're assigned to each device as it wakes up. It used to be that most of these addresses were fixed. That when you set up your computer, you told it, your address is this. That is very rare now. It's very rare. These IP addresses, this is called IPv4. The overwhelming majority of devices out on the net are still IPv4. That's a standard for various kinds of protocols. we ran out of those addresses. You can have several billion of these addresses, right? It's 255 times 255 times 255 times 255. It's a lot of addresses. Now there are so many things on networks all over the planet, including toothbrushes and forks, that we ran out of addresses. So IPv4 is being replaced by IPv6. Sooner or later in your lifetime, you'll have to replace every piece of network equipment you own. That's what keeps the wheels of commerce turning, us upgrading protocols. You can see that an IPv6 address is much larger. It has many more numbers, and apparently there can be more of these addresses than the number of stars in the universe, which means it'll probably be 20 or 30 years before we run out of it. Because sooner or later, everything's going to be networked. Everything's going to be networked. When I was a young whippersnapper, it's time for Grandpa's stories now, kids. When I was a young whippersnapper, most computers were not networked. And it was a chicken and egg thing. Why would I want to be networked to something where no one else is networked? And it was only when they started networking the first ones, when the government said we're going to start networking universities and our research facilities, that networking even made sense. Now there's actually a term of business called the network effect, which is you get more customers, the more customers you get. Duh. But what that means is like we did with Photo Jojo. I have a good experience, I tell somebody about it, and they tell somebody else about it. Pretty soon, I don't have one customer, I have a network of customers. Another kind of network that has the same kind of property is what social networks are. We've always had social networks, the people that you know, the people you talk to. And now we are starting to map these. In terms of addresses, trying to bring it around to relevancy again, you probably, if you're older, have 5 or 6 or maybe 20 different identities out on the net. If I wanted to find you and know that I was talking to you, it would be difficult. These days, places like Google and Facebook are trying really hard to make sure that you have one identity. They don't want pseudonyms anymore. They don't want handles anymore. They want to know that when messages reach you or that when messages come from you, that we can all pretend that they really were you. And there's privacy issues, but that's a whole other story. So every NIC has a MAC address that used to be unique to this piece of hardware. Every device has one or more IP addresses. The IP address gets assigned to a particular MAC address when the device wakes up through a thing called the Dynamic Host Control Protocol, DHCP. These days, a device wakes up, says, hello, I'm MAC address, blah, blah, blah. Give me an IP address. And it just broadcasts that out onto the network. It says, I'm a little baby, I want an address. And if it's connected correctly, someone somewhere says, oh, hi, your address is blah, blah, blah. Your address, you can tell these kind of addresses because they're usually like 192.168. something. Those are addresses that are assigned local to them. Or they're 10.net, 10.x.x. So IP addresses are usually assigned dynamically via DHCP. There are other kinds of addresses that are called static IP addresses. Those are less common. Those are typically servers. Those are typically ISPs. Who here has cable, cable modem? Anyone have cable? Who here has DSL? Who here has dial-up? Who here just has a phone? Who here has never been on the internet before? Who here doesn't like raising their hand? Hey, gotcha. You don't fit in any of these categories, do you? All right, remain a man of mystery. That's fine. I don't care. In any case, you may notice when you are doing your homework, for those of you who have cable or DSL, I would really like you to go home and take a look at your home network and describe it for your homework. And you'll find that outside your network, outside your local area network, your home network, you have one address. You have a static address. And inside, your machines have different addresses. So this business of assigning internet protocol addresses is happening all over the network many times over and over. The key takeaway here for today, in terms of networking and addressing, is that every packet has an address to where it's going. Every packet has an address from where it's from. And the network sends this data around through. Data can be anything. It can be mail, it can be web characters for web pages, it can be streaming video, it can be all sorts of things. A network, more vocabulary. A network is just a bunch of connected devices. In its simplest form, a network is just a bunch of connected devices. The earliest networks, and in fact, even today, the simple networks, are just a bunch of devices, each with its own name, actually hooked up to a wire. It's just a wire. That's all it is. And for you electrical nerds out there, all you need is one wire and ground. You got yourself a network. And all of these devices are basically just shouting down the same pipe, saying, "Hi, I got a packet. I want to send it somewhere." And someone else on the pipe goes, "Yeah, okay, I'll take it." Or actually, everybody takes it. The earliest networks were actually you got a cable and you had to poke it with a pin and plug it into your computer. These days, your car has a bunch of networks, probably 20 or 30 networks. They're all on the same kind of bus standard. A lot of these things in your car. There's a number of different topologies. Topology, what does that mean? It means the study of shapes. Topographic is a map of the terrain. Topology is the shape of the network. This is a bus network. This is a star network. This is a ring network. You're going to need to know the difference between all those three. There are other topologies out there. These are the only ones we care about. When you design your business network, I need to see at least these two, if not these. Token rings used to be the hot setup. Token rings used to be the fastest networks. That's not true anymore, but you'll see them out there, see them in a lot of businesses still. IBM invented token ring networks. I think Digital Equipment Corporation invented Ethernet, along with the guys at the Army. So what I'd like to do now is take a break. We've hit a number of vocabulary terms like network. Oh, I got one more thing. DHCP, bus, star, ring, IP address, MAC address, NIC, packet. The thing is, these days we don't have just one network. We have lots of them. And in fact, in a phone, you've got a network just for the phone itself. Inside of a PC, you've probably got 3 or 4 networks. So if we're going to have the ability to send packets from one thing to another, we have to be able to take the packet off of one network and move it to another network where it can continue down its journey. Think of it like sending a postcard to England. At some point, the U.S. Postal Service has to stop. I mean, we can't deliver just anywhere on the planet. And the Postal Service hands it over to that country. And there's a procedure for doing that. And then the country takes it from there. They either have their own internal system or whatever. If you have ever gotten packages from like Ukraine or China, it has been handled by several different carriers. And there's always a way of getting it from one system to the next. For networks, there are two kinds of connections that we're concerned about. One is called a router, and one is called a gateway. The simple way of getting this, and this is a critical thing, is a router allows you to move packets between similar networks. Similar networks. So like if you're handing a packet from one Ethernet network to another Ethernet network, there's a lot of things that are compatible there, and you can just use a router. Your home has a router sitting right next to the modem. There are routers in this room. Routers are real common. They just read a packet, they say, oh, this one isn't for my network, it must be for some other network, and they launch it off into their connection. A gateway is a little more complicated. A gateway connects two different kinds of networks. So for example, if my business, you're going to need this next week, if my business had both star networks and token ring networks, I would need to connect them with a gateway, not with a router. There's a lot more to this than I want to go into today. These things connect networks. Routers tend to connect roughly similar networks. Gateways connect different protocols. So let's stop with the vocabulary. Let's take a break, and then I want to go through quickly a presentation that's on the system here. Gives us another run of the same concepts. We'll do networking this today, and then on Thursday, we'll do CSS and forms. Before next Thursday, if you could take a look at your home network, we'll ask some questions about the connection between you and your provider. Okay, let's start at the top of the hour. So in 6 minutes.